ideas in the concurrence of design and construction, fundamental processes in concurrent design and construction, and progress through partnerships, the changing profession, changing the profession. In seconds, the Philippine Pavilion, as well as studies of Le Corbusier and Edgar Varese, and Sanctuary School of Ceramics, in architecture, in iron craft, in engraving, lithography, and xerography. Recapitulating the modernist experience of a movement from the flat canvas of the painting to the multidimensionality of sculpture, Ignacio began his work as an artist in painting, but came to be known best for his large-scale, site-specific installations. His installations began in what I would describe as a constructivist mode, and then, especially in the 1990s, moved to engage questions of gravity and spatial displacement, always, I think, with some component of witty insight into the specific context and materials of his work. Beginning with an installation in 1997 at the Galerie Niki Diana Marquardt in Paris, he has come to incorporate books as essential elements of his installations, working in various public and university libraries and institutes. It was in this context that it first occurred to me to invite him to do a project in the atrium staircase of the Dos Stacks, and that we're all, I think, very happy to say is the project that's now opened and will be on view for approximately a year. Ignacio Rábago's work has been presented regularly in galleries, museums, and public institutions, including Gallery Hastings, New York, De Vam, Amsterdam, the Museum of Fine Arts, Malaga, the University of Amager, Copenhagen, let's see if I can swallow that H-G enough, the Cervantes Institute in Paris, the Central Library of Copenhagen, the State Library Malmö, and the University Library in Oslo. Also a poet, Ignacio was awarded first prize in the poetry contest organized by the Spanish Institute for Immigration in 1985. In 2001, he published the book Poemas del Instante, Poems of the Instant, maybe something like Poems of the Moment or something like that. Anyway, it shows that there's a consciousness of temporality in his work, and that may be something he'll have a chance to say something more about. He is joined by two members of the team of Berkeley students who have been working with him on the installation in the library and who will continue to work with him on the installation plan for the Hearst Memorial Mining Building. Elizabeth Quinn, to my left, an undergraduate majoring in English with an intended minor in art history, and Ben Blum, a first-year graduate student in computer science, who is himself also a poet. So I want to thank you all for being here. Ignacio will present some slides of his previous works and show us some images of the construction of the installation of the Dos Stacks, along with some commentary, and then I'll ask Mike Martin, Mark Tribe, Elizabeth, and Ben to offer their remarks, and at that point we'll then throw things open for questions and comments and discussion from the floor. So, I don't know, we may need to...
I would like us first to give both of yours, Tony and Mike, thanks to, in a way, have been here to Berkeley, and you to stay here in this meeting we are having now, and very much give the thanks to Elizabeth and Ben, because all these works I do is not it's a teamwork. I mean, many of the times it's them who they say where I shall put the thing, and etc. And anyway, when I was reading the applications, I was thinking, well, these people are too clever to help me. So anyway.
So, and yeah, if we want to announce it, so we can see the slide.
Installation is difficult because if someone get the idea to hang an elephant, to put an example, I mean, once you hang it, it would be very almost the same as another some kind of actions, and some of the elements I use is the chairs. I don't know why I like chairs. I have a poem to the chair, but I like chairs because they are waiting Godot. Okay. after the year 96, I started to work with books and make a series of installations. It was called the Babel series, Babel Library series, and the first one it was in the Galerie Miciliana Marco in Paris, and this is one of the small rooms. The reason why is because I need to cover a big space, and I had used bricks before, and I was thinking, I talked to Nikki, can you get me, I don't know why I think, can you get me some books? And then we went to an antiquarium in Paris and we get a lot of books, and then from that point, I had to start to work with books and to think about the book and what is the meaning of the thing. But it's, in my case, the most of the time, reality comes first than theory. And if the theory comes first than the reality, in my opinion, is something weak. I mean, sometimes, it's not always the same. Sometimes it comes a little bit the conceptual thing, then it comes the facts. But the things they need to work by itself without explanation. You need to explain very much a thing is that it has not so much power in itself. I started to work with books, and then it was also a coincidence because I am a man who comes from philology and like to write. So in a way, it was coming good to me, but the first reason was a practical reason. This is for a Stadsbibliotek in Stockholm. It was quite difficult to build because we was not allowed to make a simple drill. Thank to God I was working with Swedish guys who are very technical and they solved all the things. Okay. This is up and down. Anyway, this is the Instituto Cervantes in Paris, and well, the funny thing of here is that I was thinking, well, how are you going to make an exhibition with broken books in the Instituto Cervantes? They are going to put my neck, no? If I go there and say, how many books I can build them and make holes, etc. So I prepare something with letters. And when I come there, I said this to the guy who was in charge of the exhibitions, and he said to me, well, we just have been throwing out 4 tons of books. So this is in the Hove Bibliothek in Copenhagen. It was a building that I was not liking at the beginning because it was more like actually it was a kind of a magazine for selling clothes before. And you hear all the time the mechanical stairs and things like this. So I was thinking how I can do something here to look powerful enough. And then the question was to put a lot of books. And it was kind of nightmare to build it and to also to don't get trapped with the crane and between and also it was all very steady. In some of the cables I can hang a certain number of books, in another cables can I hang more, and it was a lot of planification. Okay. I like to say that one of the things I like is that when normal people or the kids, because the kids they come here and say, wow, that gives me a big satisfaction. I normally make a model of all the projects I do. It's not a fixed model, it's just I take normally it's kind of black paper and I fix it in this is in my workshop, but otherwise I fix it in the table at home and then after I cannot keep them. But I think it's very, very important to make a model like if you are an architect you probably will know these things because you learn a lot. You learn how you are going to hanging, how they are going to be looking, and etc. So, this is in Henning Larsen building in Malmo. The same. It was a lot of problems to do it. At the beginning they said me yes, and after 1 year I have been preparing the thing. Then I get a no. It was not possible, and to have a no of a Swedish is very difficult to twist it. But then I come there and then we talk with the fire marshal and we talk with the people and it was some limitation about weight I can hang from the ceiling. So how I solve the thing is that the most of the weight is on the base and it's on the floor, and then the superior part of the tower is hanging and it's just only pages. This is in Oslo University. The same thing. We was not allowed to make a simple drill, and we was not allowed to hang in weight. So I said, okay. Then we put pages. But there it was the fire problem. But after talk with the people and we compromised to give kind of a sprite to 3 times to all of the pages, then we get the green light. And all these kind of installations, they have been working very well. In fact, they have been prorate, and people at the beginning was afraid that it can happen, but then they called and then the people have respect them also. Well, go back a little bit. Two funny things about this installation is that once we was placing some of these books, one of them, I don't know if it was a Quran or something like that, so I was kind of afraid to put it there. And the other thing is that some of the books who are there is also was the dean of the university who had written. So, and when he was giving the speech, he noticed and he said something about it. He said, "Oh, I can see you have been using some of these books, man." Okay. This is in my workshop. Okay, some studios in the workshop. Okay, good books. This is in Gallery Nidi. Okay. This is in the workshop. Okay, what I was saying is also the other day I thought is that now I am starting a new period that I want, because I have the feeling that the Babel Library is a more poetic part of my work than the first ones, but I want to combine again both, because in the first ones I think I was having more density, and it was the other ones, they look more, the Babel Bibliothèque look more to the eyes, but some of the other ones, for myself, they give me more satisfaction. So last exhibition I was making, it was in the Architect Fundación of Madrid, and I take again this of the columns and the diagonal, and I make exhibition, and also with the chairs. I use some of the elements I use in the other exhibition before. Yes.
So some of these columns are of the building and then you added.
Yeah, there are 1 or 2 who are from the building. Like in the Copenhagen University Amara, I put 34 columns there, and 1 or 2 of them they are from the building. I always take from the elements of the building. Like the one I'm going to make in the mining building is with the light bulbs. Okay. And here you see the fraction and the diagonal again. Okay. And this is the inside yard there with the chairs. And we get a lot of fun there, hanging the chairs. Okay.
What made you change toward this chair?
What?
What made you transfer your efforts into this form?
I didn't catch you.
Why you changed from books and stuff into this form?
Because I have used chairs before, and it's an element I also like, and I think I think if I go to the Fundación of Arquitectos of Madrid, well, the architects, they love chairs. They design a lot of chairs. They have columns. They have space. If I go to a library, I use books. If I go to other place, I use. I like to give a horse of Troya. You know, attack from inside. You know, attack from inside.
Architects don't read books. Just look at
Okay,
the
nice
pictures.
thing.
Experience and then got to know the work. Very small piece of an extremely rich portfolio of work in drawing and painting and other installation work, etc. I think the thing that was most intriguing to me about him was that, and he said this, that his work is really starts with very practical, kind of real world situations, and then he works his way into bringing kind of a process of inquiry and a theoretical kind of understanding or a poetic understanding or a way in which he begins to talk about the work as a piece that comes after the fact of making the work. The other piece of this, and I think obviously because of my own background as an architect, I think the thing that I see in most of the work, and when you really look at the drawing and the painting, it comes out as well, that he's really about, his work is really about making place. And what I mean by that is that he is really concerned with issues of how what he does fits in a context, whether the context be the canvas on which the work is done, or the space within which the work is actually taking place, or whatever the medium might be. And it really does come through as being very much connected to issues of material, issues of ways of fabrication and construction, and then how this actually begins to relate to the context of the space. I unfortunately have only seen two now that we've got the installation in the library of the book installations that he shared with you this afternoon, and it was the one in the Henning Larsen building in Malmö, Sweden. And I have to also tell you that the slides don't do justice to the actual kind of event itself. I mean, it's because you really do have to be in the space to be able to somehow really understand the complexity of the work, but yet a complexity that comes out through very simple kinds of engagements of material and construction process. So, I mean, and I think that that's the true thing that made me appreciate the work. And the other interesting part of this, that I actually didn't know Tony at the time I met Ignacio. And so Tony and I kind of met through Ignacio, but through very separate events that Tony had talked with Ignacio. Ignacio talked to me about Tony and talked to Tony about me. And we came back to the campus one fall and connected and said, we've got to do something with this. This is somebody that we really should bring to the campus and be a part of the campus kind of art community that's here. And so working with Kevin, as Tony indicated, we've been working towards trying to create this artist in residence opportunity for Ignacio. And that's been a real experience to make happen, in the sense that we beg, borrow, and steal money from every place we possibly can on the campus to make this actually happen. And it points out how difficult it is to make art happen in the university. But the kind of second piece of this in my mind was that Ignacio's actually talked about the fact that some of these projects took much longer to get permitted than actually to build and construct. And that's been the case here on campus. I think if you look at the examples of work, that many of the proposals that he actually made from the Campanile at Worcester Hall to the Doe Library stacks and so forth are here in the exhibition in the Townsend Center. And we worked for almost a year with the Doe Library people to try to convince them that we could do this particular project at the Doe Library. And we thought we had this thing all worked out. And we got down to the kind of the short end of time. Ignacio was coming. We had to get the final approval, et cetera, and it all fell apart. And it had to do with budget and people like the fire marshal and capital projects and other entities here on the campus, that the kind of the bureaucratic control that somehow deals with issues like installation of art on the campus. And the fortunate thing was that we never gave up hope that we could actually do this project. And when Ignacio arrived, he found a way to actually make it happen. I mean, this wouldn't have happened unless Ignacio had gone back to the space and actually, as he does, dealing with the space and making place, discovered a way in which this could actually happen. I think the final remark I want to make, I'm just going to take the opportunity to say this. I mean, it really pointed out to me, if you walk through our campus, how barren it is in relationship to public art. The only thing that somehow represents art on this campus is bears and athletic connected kind of events. And it's really, really interesting to me that that's actually the case. I mean, there are very few places on this campus where there's a piece of public art, particularly in the landscape, that doesn't somehow either connect to bears or something to do with athletics. And I think it's a pretty sorry statement on the part of the campus in terms of a connection to the arts in general, but kind of to just the well-being of people on campus. I think this is actually true in many of our buildings as well, and it's something I think it's pointed to me that we should really try to.
First to the genre as the turd on the plaza School of Art, you know, that's, which was a direct reaction of what had happened in classicism, for example, where art was really an integral part of it. That's all that business about the murals inside the old library that became the Asian Art Museum, all of that debate shows. So you could look at, though installation has changed quite a lot over the last 20 years, starting primarily as a formal response to the conditions of the space, or as a social cultural response, and in this case we see aspects of both of those. Recently, one of our graduates, Mi-Wan Kwan, who wisely left architecture and is now safely in art history at UCLA, did a book that really traced the history of installation art, which is called One Place After Another, a very good book, although I don't agree with her. She talks of this moving from sort of installation or public art, whatever, in relation to the particular conditions of the place, then the reaction that, okay, that's a little too divorced, let's make it functional, make them seats or something so the community can relate. Moving into totally social propositions now that almost have nothing to do with the physical conditions of the space. And I actually think it's two different trajectories that crossed at a moment. There are still people doing installations which are primarily formal, and there are people that have gone their way to, I think there's a new term called relational art now, where it deals more with interchange than it does with place. So there are installations that they're social, they work with the community, and there's very, very little, in fact, in terms of an artifact. Then there's the question of the books in the installation. As Ignacio has said, it seems like an obvious choice. It's a library, there are books there, there's something to use. So in this sense, the content reinforces the purpose of the library. But I was trying to imagine, well, that's pretty obvious. What else could be there? And how else, what other takes there might be? I mean, you could also imagine something more geometrical and spiral that worked on the physical illusion of the spiral, something that was more architectonic. Or even fish rather than books, since there's something about that space that you know, almost imagine a fish tank in there or whatever. Not that any of these are better qualitatively or even mentally in any way. It was just that I wonder at what point, if you are dealing with reaction or commentary, if you looked at music rather than something that is totally harmonic, it becomes more antiphonal, which potentially might push something into a greater richness. Here the artist has to determine how sympathetic the context, how sympathetic to the context he or she wants to be, and also the degree of testing the audience, which is the other part of this. I mean, you know, it's how it's received, reception theory, and how we're dealing with these. Or is it a composite of both an object type as well as a subjective type that's more or less in dialogue? Then there's the question of the ordering of it. If we say, okay, we take a particular direction to the content, the architecture in a way provides a formal and a spatial matrix for the work, which again the artist can either accept or very consciously work against and undermine. Gordon Matta Clark, if you know his work, fortunately building slated for demolition, but I mean chopping into things with chainsaws and whatever to make cuts through to reveal a new relationship between spaces and formal conditions that were never part of the architecture. Or Daniel Buren, you know, who just loves to put these stripes on everything as a way of, again, revealing or underscoring in some ways architectural relationships that we wouldn't ordinarily see. So the question is, how do we evaluate, how do we act, or how do we react to these conditions? In this piece, the books are distributed more or less evenly throughout an entire field. It almost looks like an explosion in some ways. other strange angles that are working against gravity, that literally the tension comes from it. But one, I think, could also imagine, I was thinking, playing with the density of the objects, either denser at the bottom going upwards or the edges, that would actually, I think, challenge the architecture to a greater degree. This is a very light and a very delicate commentary. And then also we look at the detailing, since we're architects, look at details, how the wires fixed and connected. I was really impressed that you had the tubing going through the book, so the books didn't rip, because you're obviously fighting gravity and the nature of paper on these things to make that work. And finally, which is I didn't know how long it was going to be up, but for any installation, almost any installation, there's the question of duration, or the temporal dimension of it. So we're sort of tracing these along 6 skewed axes. That the temporary installation actually has the potential to have more power, because you know what was there before, and then when it disappears, it has another power again. As the Tilted Arc episode with Richard Serra's piece, if that had been temporary, I think it would have been far more. It did become temporary, but it was there, I guess, 5 years or something. As a disruptive element temporarily, and then returning to the conditions, I think you're more aware of that situation. I think this is one of the power of installations, that it upsets the typical, it exists, it tantalizes, and it disappears. And this was very poignantly brought out by the Christo Project at the Gates in New York last month, 2 months ago now, or something that, as the artist said, you may not like it, but I'll tell you one thing, you're never going to see anything like it again. So I think this ultimately is one of the real gifts of installation as a genre.
Yeah, so it's we've been talking pretty theoretically so far, and I do computer science, which is a completely different sort of theory. So what I have to say is much more practical. From our point of view, we weren't theorizing in any way. We were just drilling holes in books, putting cables through them, and tying them up. So that turned out to be a pretty rewarding thing to do, more so than you'd expect. I'd say each of us became a complete expert in hanging books from steel cables, which is sort of nice expertise to have. It's probably not one that's going to come handy yet, but it was fun to acquire it. I do computer science, as mentioned before, and everyone's first question when they talk to me about this project is, so how did you get involved in this? Why are you interested in this? So I thought I'd go ahead and try and create a tentative link between computer science and this project, which is going to be completely ridiculous, but here it is. So one of the great mathematical results in this past century is Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which you may have heard of because it's had enormous philosophical ramifications beyond math or logic. So the result is that there exist mathematical statements that are true, but that are not provable by any sort of formal means. It's not possible to arrive at a demonstration of the truth of these statements by human reasoning processes. And another way of putting it is that there exists information that is sort of inaccessible to the human mind, to human reasoning. And you could think of this installation as a kind of physical incompleteness theorem, because the information in those books being 50 feet up in the air on a metal cable is sort of equally inaccessible to the human mind. So that would be the link to computer science, as clear as it's possible to make it. But I think that there's a little bit of merit in talking about the information in these books, because it's completely irrelevant to the installation itself. And every time that people would walk by and check out the installation, they would ask, so, how did you choose the books? What's in the books? What's the theme here? And there isn't one. They're just books. They're just there to be the physical form of a book. And so hanging them up sort of felt like liberating the books from the weight of this information that they're forced to carry. You just feel bad for the things for being so steeped with meaning. It must have been kind of nice just to sort of hang out there. So it was fun to learn the different ways that you can explore the form of a book,
see the object like a key, you know? And that's the same. When they say just don't see what mean the book. You see the book.
True. So, yeah, this is sort of what Ignacio does. Is he picks these objects frequently from the spaces themselves, and he reimagines them as just objects, just form, hanging in the space. Yeah. One of our biggest challenges, I'll just talk about sort of our experience as the installers of this project. One of our biggest challenges was to try to prevent our own concepts about the project and our own sort of personalities and aesthetics from imprinting themselves upon the installation. So one of the most glaring example of this was when I really stupidly decided to connect this cable to the same point that two other cables converged at. Remember, this was awful.
We deemed it our problem child cable because what happened was that you get to this point where suddenly after you knew what you were doing and how to do it, you'd be standing somewhere and you'd see like one little pocket of space. You're like, God, we really should get a cable there. It's impossible. So you have to like go through all these cables, put them up and down and over, and there's no way we can do it. And then you would sit there for 10 minutes with somebody else and you would just stand there and piece together and figure out how you can make that one cable that you were intent on making work. And so you'd sit there and you connect it and you pass it under and over and like
these questions have come more than once. No? The first one was Peter Yuri in the CNN in Paris when I was making it. He said in front of the camera, "You don't feel that it's a sacrilege?" I said, "I like sacrilegious." And then he said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Well, no. I said, I mean, you make it with good feeling. You care about the thing. I write books. I mean, I love books. But the thing is that these books are going to be destroyed. And then, I mean, I don't see any reason why you cannot do it. I mean, we are thinking about Shakespeare, but Shakespeare have 7 copies more in the Kerala. So I don't have any trouble with it. And besides that, there is also the literature figure, the people who are like Don Quixote is burning books, and Vázquez Montalbán I am seeing in literature there is this history of burning books. So sometimes when I am selecting books for making halls, I feel me a part of the literature because I feel, well, here I am selecting this one because sometimes I have to check this one. But so but I have books that don't mean that I don't like them.
I think the project is enormously liberating in many ways, liberating for the books. in that sense. So I
It's
think we
supported
can,
by all the people that like digital stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, besides that, in the libraries, there is well, my experience, one of these libraries is a kind of hate-love relation with the book. Every time I say to the I want to come make something with the books, and they say, yes, and where are you going to get the books? So I expect you give me. And okay, and are you going to damage them? And they put the face like this. And when I say, well, if you allow me, yes. And then they always make. So it's a kind of love-hate, because in a way, they need the space in the Kerala. And then they are always very, very happy after. We have some opposition of some of the elements of the library, but when they see that I can make something with their own work of them every day, they always congratulate me and say, "Oh, it was very good, it was very good." That is the experience I have.
You can read books with fools.
We tried.
So if there are questions or comments,
Were you influenced by astronauts floating in space?
Well, gravitas, yes, anti-gravitas fields, anti-gravitas fields.
But the vision of them, was that it? Did
From the downtown Berkeley Library in Oakbrook, two of the branch libraries in Oakland and the Albany Library saying, we got books we'd love to somehow have be a part of this. So I think it does begin to demonstrate this kind of love-hate, that they want their books to be a piece of something, but there's also divesting themselves of the physical self.
I have, I guess, a question and a comment. And first, my question for Ignacio, you have repeated installations of books and the pages in different settings. So I wonder if for you, is there a point where it feels more like you've stopped creating and are just producing, or does it constantly feel? I know that each space has its own kind of architectural challenge of space, light, height, all that. But beyond that, do you feel like it remains a creating process for you, or does it start to feel like production over time?
Oh, I'm a little tired of making installation with books now. But the thing, because it's a little bit repeating. But of course, I mean, you must say that if you have each space, it has its own things, and you need to be rich enough to kind of have variation on the same thing. But yes, I feel a little. I think I maybe going to make one in Berlin, and I think maybe we finish this cycle of the books, because I feel a little bit. Well, I know exactly all what is going on, but
CDs.
Let's
Was it up to
take
you?
one more question.
Was it up to you to decide where the books went and who designed where the cables were going?
We took turns making the cables, you know, because they had to be different lengths. So people, you know, when we're sitting there, we're trying to find some one cable because there's a blank spot right there that becomes our personal itch that we have to figure out. You know, we'd say we need to make a medium cable, we need to make a short cable, and so again, Ignacio was so wonderful to work with because he said, okay, go and do it, you know, and there we are in the back and we're doing these things and.
I have the theory that you must not place the things very much, that they get placed by themselves. You know, like a room is perfect and nothing can move, it's not alive. So, and I think they are part of the whole thing. So if they say, oh, can I place this here? I have a little bit the general idea, you know? But
Well, I wasn't sure if you designed where the cables were going to go and you two just put the
Yeah,
books
I mean,
up.
not just us two. There was a team like much larger than just us. Like you
And-
mentioned, and they all had a say in deciding. Certain cables were decided by some, certain by
I
others.
think 13 students was the
Yeah.
team. Yeah.
To the books.
I think they will be through it out. But I don't know if they give me these books, they offer me more books, and I think what I know is that, like for example, I told you the Instituto Cervantes in Paris was throwing up 4 tons of books. I know there is a place in Paris which is called the Pilot, that I don't know where it is, that all the antiquarians they go there because they threw tons and tons of books there. Some of the libraries they sell very cheap, like second. There are some editions who are like the old ones, they have a lot of value, and the new ones they have a lot of value, or less value, but they have value. But the ones who are between 100 years and things like this, some of them very beautiful because they are also handmade thing, and they don't have value at all. And then they threw them and they sell it. I have been in a farm in Paris with tractors and with the cow there and all this, that this guy who was antiquarian said, I want to show you where I have books. And it was like a big space like this with it, full of books, a Bible there from the church, and everything, full of books. So I discovered all these things after I had started to work with books. So probably they are going to be through it out. But what I feel is that now, unless there are 3, 4, 5 months alive, before they was there, no one.
Okay, I think we will genuinely make this the last question, and then in advance I want to invite people to partake of some refreshments and some reception that we have across the way, and to chat informally with Ignacio and other members of the panel. Thank you again, Marco.
I'm just going to make the comment that I think that the work's very effective and very successful by this use. If you'd taken brand new books, some art or new objects, and done this destructive thing, then it would really grate more on the nerves, I feel. But the fact that the books were used give them there's a sense of history, and also when you find out that they were slated for destruction, it's like that you gave them another breath of life, a little last gasp of utility. Also, I think that the business of, and this goes for the chairs, for the bicycle, for the books, the way you've used them in your tower constructions and the installations that we saw, they take on a more, in I don't know, Platonic terms, like the notion of a Plato